The Lancia Beta gets so much bile and hatred from the usual TV, pub and internet bores, and yet hardly anybody really knows what they're like. So in the interests of bringing you truth and justice, I selflessly spent a day playing with this one, and went to hang out with people who do really know what they're like. And unlike all those clickbait journalists and lazy bloggers, I did some actual research. And this is the real story of the Lancia Beta. Spoiler alert, it's a massively underrated car. It's really good, and 90% of the stories you've heard about it are rubbish. The Beta came in a frankly slightly scattergun range of 6 different body styles, and there was a fantastic representation of all of them at the Betaboyz do here in the Oxfordshire countryside. There was the Berlina, a 4-door saloon that looked like a hatchback but wasn't, and eventually the Trevi, short for Tre Volumi or 3 boxes, a 4-door saloon that didn't look like a hatchback and also wasn't. The HPE, which was a hatchback but was actually called the High Performance Estate, the Coupe, the Spider, which was a sporty, not quite convertible that had a removable roof panel and was designed by Pininfarina but built by Zagato, and the Montecarlo, or Scorpion if you're in North America, another sporty variant that also had a removable roof panel and was designed and built by Pininfarina, albeit originally for Fiat as the X120. I do hope you're keeping up with this. There'll be a test at the end, you know. There was also a 7th variant, the Lancia Rally 037, based on a very heavily modified Montecarlo. That was famously the last 2-wheel drive car ever to win the World Rally Championship, beating the Audi Quattro to the Constructors' Trophy by the Kevlar skin of its steel subframe teeth in 1983. They did make a road-going version of it for homologation too, but they're incredibly rare, so you'll never see one. Holy Patrick and Mary, would you look at that! I can't tell you how excited I was to see this, an actual Lancia Rally Stradale in the, well, some of it's metal. In fact, I was so excited I called it an 032, and the owner was very gentle indeed in putting me straight. Note how the engine is mounted longitudinally in this, unlike all the other variants. The 037 used the centre section of the Montecarlo, but Dallara designed a space frame chassis fore and aft, and a Bath tweaked the 2-litre engine up to 205 brake horse, even in this road-going trim, and quite a lot more for motorsport. That doesn't sound like an enormous amount of power by today's standards, but don't forget that much of the body is Kevlar and it weighs about as much as an espresso doppio and an amaretti biscuit. And just look at that brown corduroy interior. I'm not normally much moved by supercars, but I'm deeply in love with this one. Lancia was struggling by the late 60s. It had a range of cars that was cleverly designed but costly to make, and certainly in the case of the saloons, starting to look pretty dated. Enter Fiat, Lancia's blue-collar neighbour from a few blocks away in Turin, which took over the business in October of 1969, put new management in charge, and started the job of rebuilding the Lancia range. And they didn't hang about. The team, under the Fiat-appointed engineering chief Sergio Camufo, took the Beta from clean sheet of paper to production-ready show car in just over 2 years. An amazing achievement, especially when you consider the number of different variants that they designed. While the car itself was a unique design, they did use the Fiat parts bin as a starting point for the engines, adopting the excellent Lampredi twin-cam unit from the Fiat 124. This is a remarkable engine that saw active service for over 30 years in everything from the FSO Polonaise to the Lancia Delta Integrale by way of the Morgan Plus 4. This engine won the Constructors' World Rally Championship 10 times, a record, and the World Sportscar Championship in, yes, a Lancia Beta Montecarlo, twice. Lancia's engineers did put their own spin on the Fiat engine, designing their own alloy head to go on the Fiat iron block, with hemispherical combustion chambers and new inlet and exhaust manifolds to improve efficiency and output, as well as different twin-choke carburetors from either Solex or Weber, depending on whose truck had delivered that week. I'm going to come right out and say it, the Beta is a stonkingly good car to drive. The engines pretty much all punch a class above their weight. The 1300 goes more like a 1.6 and this 1.6 feels like a 1.8 or 2 litre. I haven't driven the later fuel-injected 2000IE, but I reckon that would make for a fascinating back-to-back test against my BMW E30 320i. The steering has lots of feel on the move, if slightly heavy at parking speeds. The handling is great, with McPherson strut independent suspension all round, ubiquitous now but kind of cutting edge back in the early 70s. There's a 5-speed gearbox on all versions, again very much cutting edge for the 70s. Even this 1300 Berlina, which is the least sporting model, but still lively and a delight to drive. This one belongs to a friend of mine and has been living in my shed for some time, but that is another story that I'll tell another day. And you can tell everyone that the wooden gear knob is straight out of the Lancia Stratos, and you'd be right. I'll do a full driving review of the coupe in a separate video, so keep watching and I'll post up a link to it towards the end once it's ready. I did almost buy my own Beta once, a 1983 2000IE HPE in metallic blue. I got as far as putting a deposit down, but it was advertised as coming with an MOT, and when the seller came to actually put it through the test, it failed catastrophically on, well, you can probably guess what it failed on. Yes, that's right, rust, which is what the Lancia Beta is famous for. They were built out of scrap Russian steel and rotten from the factory, and the engines all fell out, and that's why there are none left, right? Wrong. Firstly, the Russian steel story is just made up. Yes, there was a trade deal between Italy and the Soviet Union in 1966 that led to the setting up of the Togliatti factory on the banks of the Volga to make rebadged and re-engineered Fiat 124s as Lada. But there's zero evidence that that was in any way paid for by low-grade Russian steel that Fiat or its subsidiaries then went on to use in their factories. But there were rust issues, more likely caused by condensation building up when the production lines stopped under the regular micro strikes that hit the Italian car industry, and not just the Italian, in the 1970s. So the giant oak of the famous scandal did grow from a little acorn of truth. The story started on the 9th of April 1980 when the Daily Mirror posted this on its front page, revealing a secret Lancia plan to buy back defective cars at a cost of £1 million. The problem was not wholesale rot, but specifically the brackets that held the back of the engine subframe on the early Berlina saloons. Not the coupes or the HPEs or the Montecarlos, mark you, just the saloons. This was a simple piece of box section that had been made out of insufficiently thick steel and insufficiently coated in protective paint. In the most extreme cases, this could eventually fail and the subframe would drop a couple of inches and come to rest on the bulkhead. It did not mean the engines would fall out on the road while you were driving along, even though I'm sure someone will put in the comments that their cousin's wife's sister's dog's vet had a nephew who heard of someone's friend whose brand new Beta's engine fell out on the M6 on the way home from the dealership and everyone died. It didn't. They didn't. Even so, obviously this isn't good and Lancia rightly issued a recall. For context, all car makers issue recalls, and it's hardly a badge of shame. In 2019, for example, the most recalls were from Mercedes-Benz, and the second most were from BMW, neither of which I can remember getting laughed at as being death traps on Top Gear. So my point is that yes, there were rust issues, but it wasn't the rust that did for Lancia's reputation in the UK, it was terrible PR.
The Italian car makers, Lancia, are buying back hundreds of their Beta models and scrapping them because of serious rust in the engine mountings.
Lancia dealers are trading old models for new, obligingly telling disgruntled customers that they'll buy back their rusted Beta saloons, worth only scrap to the company, and offering generous part exchange terms for the new models. It's all part of a frantic public relations exercise to help cover up the rust problem they've identified as destroying their cars.
Whoa, hold on. Either it's a massive publicity campaign or it's a cover-up. It can't really be both, can it? Sue Lloyd-Roberts went on to become a famous special correspondent, winning an Emmy Award and the CBE for reporting on political corruption from some of the world's dodgiest regimes. But back in 1980, she was a junior ITN reporter looking to make her name by turning the pretty thin gruel of a car maker recall into a monstrous scandal.
So can Lancia honestly say that there's a limit to the number of cars affected?
No, all I can say is that with the improvements in production, we hope that this has eliminated the problem, but I would be foolish to categorically state that it will never happen again.
Oh, Andrew. The correct answer here would have been that Lancia redesigned the car years ago to fix the problem, we're looking after all the affected customers, and we've introduced a 6-year rust warranty with annual inspections, which is a way better deal than any other car maker has ever offered. But this poor man has been sent into this gunfight armed with only a structurally corroded spoon, and has given an honest engineer's answer to what is clearly a massively loaded marketing question. All cars in the 1970s were prone to rust. Fords, Vauxhalls, Volkswagens, even BMWs. Minis were famous for the rear suspension subframes letting go, and on 2CVs and Renault 4s, the floor pans were, and still are, practically service items. These cars are revered today, not dumped on some clickbait list of the world's worst cars just because they had a recall 7 years into the model cycle. The good news is that while most Betas did eventually succumb to rot like every other car from the 1970s and vanish from the roads along with Lancia's whole UK operation by the 1990s, there are still quite a few left, and the ones that are left are not typically full of rust. And the even better news is that they're excellent cars, with a very friendly and supportive community of owners and a decent network of parts and expertise, thanks in large part to Betaboyz, the organisers of this 50th birthday event, and the Lancia Motor Club. And because of all the nonsense, they're a bit of an insider tip. So not just better, but a whole lot cheaper than the equivalent Capri or Cortina, say. So go ahead and buy one. Or just hit that like button down there to say to hell with all the pub bores. Meanwhile, if that's whetted your appetite for some more about how good Lancias are, then watch this next. Cool, I'll tell you what, feel better for getting that off my chest.